Good morning, TV land. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at this time of day. Welcome to WeBeamTV's Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. This episode is brought to you by Heroes in Action, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to violence prevention education. Their headquarters are based here in Port Richey, Florida, and they're able to do workshops for kids, women, churches, businesses, anything that has to do with violence prevention, bullying, and our topic for today is going to be human trafficking. So that's one of the things that we touch on, but we have an expert for that. Let me introduce, I am Ray Amanat, your host, and my co-host from an undisclosed safe house somewhere in Texas, Mr. Steve Reed. How you doing, Steve?
Oh, Ray, I'm doing fantastic, and sometimes it's not as safe as I would like it to be.
I know, this is a crazy world, and we're dealing with crazy issues. And today we've got a very special guest discussing a very serious topic that is not just here in our country, but it's worldwide. And that is human trafficking. I'd like to bring in Mr. Retired Captain Keaton Strong, all the way from my hometown in St. Louis. I now reside here in Florida, but Keaton, welcome to Taboo Talk.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Do you want to give us a little bit of background of who you are and how you came to this topic of human trafficking, how you're the expert in that field?
So I started back in 2008 working in the juvenile division and missing persons of missing juveniles. During that time, we started to notice a trend of juveniles that were missing for extended periods of time, that we were either locating or they were returning home, but they were returning home a lot different than it was when they left. Kids were coming back with money, extra clothes, fancy items, things that they couldn't afford and or did not have when they left and went missing. We went into further investigations and started to realize at that time it still hadn't hit the word of human trafficking the way it's talked about now. We knew that these young folks were involved in some type of exploitation. We just didn't know what. We further went into it, and as we went into it, we started to discover that it was actually human trafficking that these young folks were going into. From that point on, it was more of in-depth investigations that resulted in activities involving nightclubs, dance halls, massage parlors, nail shops, things of this nature that we continue to locate missing juveniles in. And from that, we started to then discover a lot of the adults that were involved. And so I've been at this now over 10 years of doing trafficking. And during that time, I've trained a lot of different locations, hospitals, clinics, schools, police departments, fire departments, and EMS, because they also encounter these things. It's just an enormous amount of public community engagements involving trafficking. So my background is super extensive in trafficking. I've had a lot of cases. The good thing is a lot of my cases did not go to court because the traffickers pled out. But I also had cases where we did go to court. You know, the goal of a good investigator is to try to prevent from your victim having to be re-victimized again by having to go to court.
Sure. I mean, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you do to raise awareness in all these industries. I want to dive right into this very taboo topic. And I don't want to glorify traffickers, but how much does a trafficker make getting into this type of illegal enterprise?
I mean, an average trafficker typically traffics anywhere between, 4 to 6 individuals, whether that be male or female, all female, male, or both. Your average trafficker if they're trafficking on a regular basis with that number of people, can easily make, over $100,000 easy, anywhere between $100,000 and, 500,000, depending upon how much trafficking that they're involved in and where they're trafficking at, because some demand bases are higher in certain locations than they are in others.
Oh, Captain Strong, I know this is a very difficult topic for you to talk about. Myself, having come out of the coaching world, still very much in the coaching world, I've worked with a lot of people that have dealt with either trafficking or sex trafficking or sex abuse things. So my heart goes out to you for what you have been involved with, because I know it's a very difficult topic for you to discuss. Mm-hmm. Both in a courtroom setting as well as on an individual basis. So I am very, very excited to have you on our call this afternoon. But I'm curious. The numbers are really crazy, more and more around the world. And you've got some states that there's a tremendous amount of trafficking, in other states, not so much, at least not that much that we hear. Why one state over another state?
So what you find through the Polaris Project is there are a lot of states who do more of advocating and promoting and giving out community resources for people to know how to identify trafficking and being able to report trafficking to local and federal authorities. What you would find is there are some states who actually have a higher number of trafficking involved, but a lower number of reporting. And when I talk about reporting, that's notifying police departments or federal agencies that they believe that there are trafficking type of activities taking place within their state. So when you see states that have higher numbers of trafficking indicated cases, that's because they have higher number of people reporting. And typically those are the states who are doing the intense efforts of promoting the hotline, promoting reporting, getting community advocacy programs out, and making sure that everyone is aware that trafficking does exist. So you'll have states that truly have a higher number of trafficking, but a lower number of reporting. And so that's where you fall in with each state and the number of cases that are being reported.
So reporting all of the different cases is obviously that's a significant thing, and promoting the hotlines and those sorts of things. But I'm in Texas, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but Texas is a southern state, and we have a border along Mexico, a very long border. And right now, that border is extremely porous. Mm-hmm. How does that impact my state of Texas versus other states around the country?
So any state that has a border, you're going to find that there's a large number of trafficking, more so exploitation coming in and out the border states. You'll find that, immigration is not only just for immigration, they also Homeland Security also covers trafficking, and that's the trafficking of persons across border lines and through shipping and receiving. And those states are going to have a higher level of trafficking taking place because it's easy to remove people. And so what you'll find is states like Texas, states like New York that have ports to get in and out. If you look at the number of missing persons in those states, those numbers are higher. And so that's because there's an easy access to border transportation. And don't get me wrong, immigration, Homeland Security is doing the best that they can fighting trafficking across the country, especially when they have to deal with the exposures of the borders, and not just trafficking, but drugs as well as guns. And I always promote when I talk about trafficking that Trafficking is on the high level of drug trafficking, and gun smuggling falls right along the lines of human trafficking. And human trafficking falls like number 2 in between drug trafficking and gun smuggling. But what you'll find with most human trafficking cases, you're going to have drugs and guns with most of the human trafficking cases that you have.
So, Captain Strong, is trafficking just about sex, or are there other types of trafficking that people get abducted for? Take us down that road of what traffickers are looking for, and what's the average age of the child they're looking for as well?
So trafficking doesn't just involve sexual exploitation. It involves any type of commercial exploitation, which means it could be for sex, it could be for forced servitude, slavery, anything that's forced labor that you involve where there's some type of exchange of a good for a commercial act. And so when you start talking about what traffickers are looking for and victimization, hey, each trafficker is different. I've had traffickers who looked for victims who were overweight because they worked on the mental psyche, because human trafficking is a mental psyche. To me, and has been for most of those of us who work in trafficking, it is a mental illness, because that plays on the mental psyche a lot. And so you get people with low self-esteem. They're looking for people in harsh circumstances, which, especially this time of year, it's cold outside. You have issues with light and gas, bills needing to be paid. When you look at people like that, you're looking at circumstances and timing. Circumstances and timing plays a huge impact on the ability to traffic someone. And so if they're involved in domestic violence, or they're involved in child abuse or sexual assault at home, those things play a huge portion into why you find people being trafficked. Yes, you have those that are being abducted and forced into trafficking, but it's a lot of domestic trafficking throughout the United States. And those are folks who, they see an opportunity, the opportunity looks good, and then when they get there, they realize that it's not actually cracked up to be what they thought it was going to be, and now they don't have the opportunity to return back to their hometown, home city, or home period, because now they're being forced. And so you have to have 3 elements of trafficking when dealing with adults, which is force, fraud, or coercion. And one of those elements have to be into the factors of the commercial exploitation for it to be considered trafficking. Whereas if they're 18 or under, all you need to be able to prove is that there's some type of commercial sexual or forced servitude type of exploitation involved, and they are automatically considered victims of trafficking by the definition. So, I mean, there's all different types of ways to victimize people and see a victimization and get people to be victimized without knowing that they're victimized.
That's one of the times that I heard you speak when I was in St. Louis. It blew me away where you had talked about a child that was trafficked. They try to get them, if they have siblings, to get their siblings, brothers or sisters, to be trafficked as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
And so I call it the grocery shopping method. And so as just like with any other consumer, when you look at consumers pick their grocery stores based off of certain things. It's either the product, the availability of the product, the hours of the store, the location of the store, the amount of product they can get their hands on, how fresh the product is, and how customer service comes into play. So you turn that around and you put that into victimization. Traffickers will look in locations where they have a large availability to choose from. They will look at age brackets to see what age bracket works best for them. They're looking at the appearance of the victim, just like you would look at the appearance when you're going to the meat store. You're looking at the appearance of the meat. You're checking the texture. You're looking at expiration dates. Well, they look at victims the same way. You look at a victim and you're saying, okay, are they aged out? Are they too old? Is that what I like? Some traffickers like children, some traffickers like adolescents, some like adults. And so it's going to be dependent upon their taste and the availability to them and the quantity. And when I talk about quantity, is there an availability for them to traffic multiple people at one time with one hit? And when I say one hit, it's like looking at a kebab in the store. The kebab has multiple aspects on it. And so those multiple aspects are multiple individuals that you can look at and say, okay, what's the presentation? Do they look like that they're having a hard time? Could I get a good price to charge for them if I put them into the trafficking aspect? And then the last part of it is, hey, you have to season and understand the product. And it's a shame when you talk about victims as products, but you have to relate that to people to understand that that's how traffickers look at victims. They don't look at them as human beings. They look at them as a product. And so if the product, you don't know what the product is unless you sampled the product to determine what it is that you're going to put a price on that product. And when that product ages out or expires, the opportunity to go back home is very slim if they're not rescued. And the opportunity for them to return and the trafficker not be concerned about them telling or exposing them is even more of a concern. And that's why we find a lot of the victims, if they're not rescued, they don't make it back.
Oh, Captain Strong, every word you say presents another question for me. And I think I've got about 35 or 40 questions right now. So, Ray, you can go ahead and take the rest of the hour off. And, seriously, one of the questions that I've got, and you kind of hinted at this, do the traffickers look for specific age or gender, or is there something specific that they are looking for? And I'm going to go back to what I asked a few minutes ago about being in Texas. Are you finding that they're looking for people that have an international look, whether it's from somebody south of the border, Middle East, Asia, whatever, or do they even care? Is that part of that demographic that they're looking for?
So when you talk about trafficking, traffickers are looking at not only the actual victim, they're looking at location. So your victims are being chosen by location and availability. So you'll find that, yes, the biracial look or international look is going to be more of what they're going to be looking for. I've talked about victims and being in trafficking as young as 9 years old. I've had victims that young, and then extremely older as well. So you're looking at locations. And so biracial victims are more prevalent in the trafficking world when you start to see locations where they can be placed and not look like they're out of place. So, being biracial, you can go into an African-American neighborhood, you can go into a white neighborhood, you can go into a Latinx neighborhood and not seem out of place and not pick up too many questions unless you have observant people in that neighborhood that understand that this person is new to the neighborhood. I received a lot of trafficking tips based off of just that, people being vigilant in their neighborhoods and knowing that there's a person now in the neighborhood that has never been in the neighborhood before, does not seem to understand the burns and the surroundings of the neighborhood, which is an actual key factor of trafficking, is not knowing the location in which you are in, not having burns and surroundings as well, to note that there's something wrong with this person. So, the percentage, is based off of location. It's based off of the need and need base. So, of course, when I'm doing Asian massage parlors, the need base is very hard for me as an African-American male to do investigations inside of Asian massage parlors because I am not part of that ethnic background. But again, depending on location, you have a lot of African-Americans who go into some of these Asian massage parlors that are not legitimate massage parlors, which I have closed down during my time. And, of course, seizing money and holding accounts, all of that plays a part in location and victimization.
Again, you've given me so many different things to think about. I saw a YouTube video. Actually seen several different videos recently where it's an older man, maybe early to mid 20s, walking down a corridor, maybe in a shopping center or mall, grocery store, something of that sort. And there's a young woman or a young girl, and she starts showing some different hand gestures. Should we as average people be looking for those gestures, or what kinds of gestures, or is there someplace where we can go to see what those gestures are so that we can be better informed, so we can be on the lookout to be able to help in those situations?
And so when I teach the public, I talk about looking at body movements and understanding what body movements look like. That's not something that's learned overnight. It takes time. Like with me, I could be out and see something that absolutely will alert me. I'll give you a prime example. I was in Miami not too long ago. I was sitting in a restaurant, and immediately I had an older gentleman and a young lady hit that restaurant. I was on vacation, by the way. Let me put that out there. I saw the young man come in. I saw the young lady come in. It's 8:30 in the morning. She's dialed up very well. Nails are done. Face is done, but she has on a head bonnet. And typically head bonnets are used to cover your hair because you don't want to mess it up from sleeping. She was dressed very diligently versus the man that was with her, who had on a tank top. His hair was disheveled, but what you saw was his hands on both of her shoulders. And as they navigated through the restaurant, he navigated her. And so I'm sitting at a table with a bunch of other policemen because we're all on vacation, and I'm telling them, hey, my senses are going off. And as you see this gentleman navigating through the restaurant, I told them, I said, if he sits her and she doesn't sit her own spot, there's a situation. And so when he gets her into the restaurant, he sits her down facing the back of the public. So she can't see anything that's coming in, but he's able to see everything. And so I watch a little longer and wait for the waitress to come to see if he's going to allow her to order, if he orders for her. And the minute that the waitress came in, and she looked at the menu, but she never ordered. He ordered for the both of them, then gave the waitress the menu back. It's things like that I can pick up on. Your average person is not going to pick up on that. I had policemen with me who did not pick up on that because this is not what they do on a regular basis. But for me, those are telltale signs. It's something to be addressed. So, again, you're on vacation. You don't know where these people are staying. It's not something you're going to risk, especially when I have my, family and kids with me as well. But it's simple things like that. I could just be anywhere and pick up on things because this is what I do on an everyday basis.
So in one of the presentations that I heard you speak at, you talked about how pimps or traffickers mark their intended targets or victims with tattoos and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about that? Is there other ways of identifying potential victims of trafficking?
I mean, so you have tattoos, you have brandings. You'll find a lot of the tattoos are now going from external tattoos to internal tattoos inside of the mouth, or places where you have to physically look to see the branding. They'll brand their names, they'll brand their logos, they'll put crowns on some of these young ladies and young men. They put initials. I mean, it's a multitude of different things that we as investigators pick up on when it comes to branding. Certain clothing I've seen with certain victims that their traffickers only allow them to wear certain clothing because, again, this is not just a localized thing. This is an organized operation. I've had traffickers who know other traffickers in other states, and they swap victims, and depending upon locations, you don't know what you're getting into. This is an organized world that is extremely dangerous, and it's ways of showing danger without putting things out in the public. So, John, I got a question for you.
You mean
Can you hear me, John?
Steve or?
I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, go for it.
So, Steve, I'm sorry, Steve. Question
Okay.
for you. So,
Yes, sir.
you look pretty diligent to me. So, do you have kids?
I have a 22-year-old stepson.
Stepson, is he in college?
No, actually, he is an auto mechanic.
But he stays in Texas.
Yeah, he's in North Texas.
Okay, you married?
Is he?
No,
Or am
you.
I? I'm married.
You.
Yes,
Okay. How long have you been married?
to this amazing wife, a little over 5 years, 5.5 years.
So 5.5 years you've been married. You have a wonderful stepson that works in the auto business.
Yes, sir.
And does he have children?
You're asking a bunch of questions that I don't know that I want to. I don't want to share these things, Captain.
And so the reason why I ask those questions, and I know the public's like, where's this guy going with this? As a trafficker, it's simple things like that that helps me as an investigator determine how well can you be trafficked. And so we're on a public TV show, so it's different because if I'd have had you in person, I would have got all of those answers out of you because you would have trusted me to be there with you to answer those questions. And this is a national audience, so it's a little bit different, but understanding that's how traffickers get to know people. And like I've talked about to other audiences before, it takes less than 15 seconds to get someone actually attached to the possibility of being trafficked. All it takes is the right information and the right set of circumstances. So what I know is, hey, I have your name. I know that you have a stepson. I know that you're married. I can go online. I'll Google your information. It'll then tell me who your stepson is. I will find something because I'm sure he's put resumes out there that would tell me where he works. And then from that point, I can go to his job. I can sit there and wait for him because I will get a picture of him offline because I'm sure online somewhere he's posted some about his family because he loves you guys. And because he loves you, he's going to post you because he's not embarrassed about his family. And so from those things, those are simple things. That's all it takes for a trafficker to get on top of you. And you gave me limited information.
Ray, make sure that our John edits out those segments there. And Captain, I had a suspicion where you were going, and that's why, no offense, I cut your sorry butt off.
That's right.
And
but you know what? You'd be surprised at how many times I'm able to get people like that. They give me their kids, their grandkids, their dog, what times of the year that they travel, when their house is empty. And so you have to look at all of these things when you look at where it is that we're going with this. And because of that, I try to teach people all the time, be careful about the information that you put out there into the public because it's people out there to do things just like that.
So Steve, real quick, I asked Keaton to do that to you because full disclosure, I was at a seminar that Keaton was giving and he asked for a volunteer. And I'm like, pick me. I want to see what he does because that's how I learn. And he brought me up on the stage and he asked me those same questions. Am I married? Do I have kids? And I'm just giving him all this information and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And he talks about, you see those vans with the stickers on the back that show mother, father, all the family, and they have a dog and everything. That's telling a trafficker also everything about that family, and they'll just follow the van and find out where they are and are they in the neighborhood that is what they're looking for. Am I right?
Yep, you're right on it. Yes, sir.
Now, the funny thing, though, Ray, is when you see one of those vans and you're in Yellowstone Park, that's actually a symbol for the grizzly bears, that there's a smorgasbord right there. Same basic idea. But anyway, Captain, you scare me. No offense. I don't want you to take that personally. But thankfully, with the coaching that I've been doing for several decades, I know those same types of questions, and I ask those same kinds of questions of my clients. And I had one client several years ago that she was about 23, 24 years old. When she was about 12 or 13, her stepbrother's best friend came over when he knew that nobody else would be around, and he propositioned her. That led to a molestation. A few weeks later, it ended up in a rape, and then drugs were involved. And then, long story real short, he said, "Hey, let's go for a ride." And she ended up in a different city, and he trafficked her, and she found herself in prostitution for about 10 years.
Yep.
So
And that's all it takes.
So
is that a typical scenario that people look for, or?
So
Yeah, I mean, that's right on the money. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, Captain Strong, can you talk about the grooming process? Because it's not always a snatch and grab abduction, but the grooming process that they build their confidence in somebody that has low self-esteem, and then they introduce the porn industry to them as boyfriend, girlfriend, which segues into possible, now if you want to make money, you got to do this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
And so I do a segment in the high schools where I talk about the guy that's at the bus stop, and all of the students and the kids in the neighborhood know this guy, and they're familiar with this guy, and this guy's cool, and they know that he has, flashy items, and he's out and he's talking, and what it is he's paying attention to who's getting on and off the bus, and who's got friends, and that kid that's walking home alone all the time, that looks like they don't have a purpose, but they're by themselves. They're not involved in the activities when they get off the bus. This person approaches them, gives them just a phone number and says, "Hey, if you ever get lonely, you need somebody to talk to, just give me a call." It's not a force type of thing. It's not a aggression. I'll just give you a phone number, and if you ever get bored, just give me a call. And when you have kids that are loners, even adults that are loners who don't have friends or family to go to, they feel like they're isolated. Hey, they're going to pick up the phone and make that phone call. Why? Because that one person gave them a calming, gentle gesture to just pick up the phone and call me because I'll listen. And from that point, that listening turned into, "Hey, when you get off the bus, do you want to grab a bite to eat? Sure. What time do your parents get home?" And that from that point, it's like, "Hey, let's go grab something to eat." And then the next thing you know is, okay, your parents don't get home until 7, 8 o'clock. Look, let's go by the mall because I see that you need some shoes, or I see, your nails need to be done, or I want to get your hair done, but you can't tell your parents where it's from. You got to tell them that, hey, it came from a friend. And from that point, it becomes a relationship, and it's a casual relationship that then over time becomes a romantic relationship, because that relationship is built on trust. And over times with trust, this person continues to do things for this other person, this victim, who's not knowing that they're about to be victimized. And then they'll hit them with the, "Hey, I'm in a hard situation. I need some help. And I've been helping you all of this time. So now I need some help. And so can you, go to a party with me, and you're going to have a good time. And we're going to make sure that, everything is okay." And they introduce them to, social life events where there's money being made, and they're showing them how to make money, doing minimal at the time, but not knowing that that's going to increase into exploitation and or servitude of some way. And before you know it, they're stuck, and it's all over a grooming relationship. It's taking time to get to know the person, get to know them, understand their deficiencies, things of that nature. So it's a whole lot that goes into this. We can talk about human trafficking for hours and we still not hit the core of things.
No offense, Captain, but you can talk about human trafficking for hours. I'd rather not, but that's a personal thing. But
Absolutely.
that client that I mentioned a few minutes ago, she ended up in one of my books, and I called her Candy. Now her name is changed, obviously. I had to protect her, but in her particular situation, she came out of a broken family. Her mom had divorced her dad, and the mom remarried. The stepdad was a great guy from what she told me. Her stepbrother was a great guy from what she said, but this other party that came into the mix, he was the one. Is that a typical scenario where they look for people that become vulnerable because of family relationships or possible challenges at home, those sorts of things? Do they even get to that point where they're finding out that kind of information?
Absolutely, and that's some of the key factors of the grooming process, as well as the um, traffickers seeking out victims. They're looking for broken households. They're looking for young men and young women who need that father figure in their life, or someone who actually shows them the amount of time, care, and concern that they feel that they are missing. And they absolutely go for those types of victims all the time. I mean, like I said, I dealt with more of my victims that were having at home family issues that run away and then find themselves involved in trafficking. And when it came to the adults were more of, they were just in bad circumstances at bad times, and they did what they had to do, at least what they thought they had to do, to get out of the circumstance, not realizing that they were not going to be able to get out of those circumstances.
So I've got a two-part question for you. What do parents need to look for? And you already mentioned some things. The kids come home, they've got bling, they've got really nice clothes, et cetera, those kinds of things. But along with that, this girl, Candy, after working with her, and I worked with her for 2 very intense weekends, and this is Friday night to Sunday evening. And when I was completely finished working with her, the last night, actually the second night, I had to go home and take a very long shower. And I just felt filthy as a result of things. I can imagine that you've got some of those same types of things. But I tell people oftentimes that what I really wanted to do was get a nice stout aluminum baseball bat and track down this guy and just, anyway. But is there a story, a person, a victim that you can think of that's one of those gut-wrenching that you will never forget about?
Yeah. So I had a young lady. I received a call from one of the service providers that works with victims of trafficking, advising me that they believed that one of their clients that they were servicing was getting ready to run away. They gave me some information on the client. I'd never seen the young lady before in my life. They gave me somewhat of a descriptor of her and said that she was going to be at the bus station. So they asked, hey, can you just keep her from running away? Maybe build some type of, relationship with her. So when I get to the bus station in St. Louis, this young lady, I can spot her a mile away because she's actually dressed very nice to be in the bus station in St. Louis. And so I walk up, I yell her name, and I say, hey, I'm looking for you. And I told her who sent me. She took off running, and I said, okay, well, that's what they do. They young. So I let her run. I got in my car. I didn't chase her on foot because that's how kids get hurt. I got in my car and I rolled along the road, and she's steady running, and I'm yelling out the window, hey, can you just stop and talk to me? I just need you to talk to me for a few seconds. And she told me no a couple of times, but I kept riding with her. And then eventually she said, so you're just not going to stop following me until I talk to you? And I said, yeah, hey, I don't want you to come in my car or anything like this. Just step out into the street. Because one, she's a young lady. And two, I'm an older guy who she's never met before, but I'm aware of her, circumstances based off the client, the service provider who called me. So I had a conversation with about 30 minutes. That's all it took. And I gave her my card and I told her, hey, if you ever get into a situation, I promise you, if you call my number, I'm going to answer the phone no matter what. And so I was able to get her to come home that day, but she told me, hey, I'm going to run. I just don't know when, but because you put forth such an effort, I'm going to go home today because I promised you I would. And clearly she did. 3 days later, she ran. She ended up on the Greyhound. while on the Greyhound, she fell asleep and got discombobulated on her location. She started calling me in the middle of the day and saying, "Hey, I think I made a bad decision. I ran away. I don't know where I'm at." So I'm trying to get locations from her. She hangs up and says, "I'll call you back." So now I'm stuck to the phone. She's calling and she's texting. Then she tells me that she thinks she's in Kansas somewhere, but she wasn't sure where she was at. But she, at this point now, she's with the trafficker who sent for her. Couple of hours go by, I get another phone call from her, and when I pick up the phone, I'm hearing screams in the phone, and she's screaming to me to help her. She didn't know where she was at. She was trying to give me some locations. We were trying to locate her phone based off the information we had, and she's yelling in the phone that he's hurting me. And I could hear him in the background yelling at her, and she's screaming, "He's hurting me. He's hurting me." I hear a loud crash. She gets out of the house. She's running. I can hear him in the background telling her that he's going to kill her when he catches her. She's running. She gives me some locators. She made it to almost to a gas station where she couldn't see the gas station because she didn't have her glasses. She was trying to read me the information on the gas station to give me a direct location, and the phone went dead. Had to been one of the most heart-wrenching moments in my entire career, because I literally was paralyzed in my office with the phone in my hand, and I couldn't move. And it was one of those things, because I'm hearing what I heard in the phone, and I couldn't personally get to her the way that I'm used to getting to victims. And so it affected me in a tremendous way. Fortunate enough for me, the folks that I worked with, along with the state officials for the state of Kansas, actually had located her. So that crash that I heard was not only her going out, but that was them coming in. And they end up getting him and her. They recovered her. She was hurt, but she was able to get, through that. But my point I'm making is that small relationship of 30 minutes and a business card with a phone number saved that young lady's life.
Good for you.
So, I mean, that is, wow. Captain Strong, my dad was a child psychiatrist, and he worked with children that suffered from depression, that were suicidal. He would get those 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock calls in the morning to where he would leave. And I would ask him, "Dad, how do you deal with this type of trauma on a daily basis?" So, I mean, you hear about soldiers dealing with PTSD, but then firefighters and police officers deal with trauma. They see it all the time. How do you deal with that trauma? How do you keep your sanity?
I mean, it's hard because, I've dealt with a lot of cases that were very traumatizing. I've dealt with cases that involved multiple victims, multiple teenage victims at that. It's hard. I mean, you have to seek therapy for yourself, and you have to seek the right therapist. Not all therapists are good therapists for this type of information and line of work. So you have to have someone that is understanding and familiar with what it is that you deal with trauma-wise, and be able to assist you with your day-to-day operations. If I didn't personally see someone relative to the traumas that I've went through in this job, dealing with what I've dealt with, I absolutely, and it's unfortunate. People do bad things to themselves when you deal with stuff like this on a regular basis, and they're not being regulated and being able to talk about these things to someone who's, one, bound by law not to discuss it, but to be able to get it off your chest and be able to cope and have good coping mechanisms. So, I mean, it makes a difference when you do that, and having a family. So, I mean, that helps tremendously.
So, what can parents do is there changes of behavior of the child that would be red flags? What are some red flags that parents can identify if their child is being groomed or possibly trafficked? Because I know, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, social isolation is a big thing. When you start having kids, and adults the same, that are used to being around people and they're used to being around family, and then they start isolating themselves. That's a key flag to look for, because isolation is big. The other thing is, of course, internet and social media access. If they're isolating themselves and the only thing that they are doing all day long is paying attention to social media or on their cell phone, you need to know who it is that they're interacting with. That's the same for video games as well. If they're video game players and that's all they do is play video games, especially those where they can reach out and play with people that are from the unknown, you need to be paying attention to those things like that. Not wanting to be at home, or better yet, used to them being at home, and then now all of a sudden they're gone, and they're gone for hours at a time, and now you don't know where they are. Those are things that you need to look into. Erratic behavior all of a sudden is another situation that you look into. Skipping school, because that's big. If they start to skip school or continues to have patterns of skipping school, and or continuous tardies where they're being late more and more every day to school, you have to start asking yourself what's going on with your kids. So, you have to look at those things when it comes to the children. As far as adults, you just have to pay attention to people's circumstances. People change every day, and sometimes it's for the good, but sometimes it's for the bad. And if you're not paying attention to the adult, and seeing some of their changes that's alarming to you, then you may miss it.
Steve, you're
Sorry.
There you go.
I muted myself. I had to clear my throat. So anyway, we've talked a lot about the victims and the perpetrators, but I got a question for you. Our legal system, unfortunately, is pretty messed up right now. And there are a lot of people that are being let out of prison when I don't think they should be let out of prison. Simply put, is there any kind of legislation that is being worked on right now on a national level that you know of that would prevent the perpetrators from being let out?
And so, two things with this. That's a two-part. One, we find ourselves in the trafficking world attempting to go after traffickers on the federal level more than the state level, because that time that they're given is 90+% of the amount of time that they would receive. And the penalty for trafficking on the federal level is much higher. This past year, there were numbers put out, and the increase in arrests for trafficking has went up 33% from last year. In 2021, it went up 33%, and that's a national number. 33% increase in arrests for trafficking is a wonderful number when you look at the numbers that we had in the years prior, and that's a huge number. Now, don't get me wrong, like I tell you all the time, I tell people all the time, this is our first time talking, but I tell people all the time, there are a lot of trafficking investigations that take place. There's not as many trafficking convictions that take place, because we have to have victims who are able to sustain going through this court system. So, we're working diligently, year after year to continue the federal enforcement of trafficking. They are doing a good job. Homeland Security, FBI, those entities are working extremely hard to prosecute victims of trafficking. State attorney general's offices, especially in Florida. Florida has a really good attorney general's office who really strives on prosecuting trafficking cases, and they have a really good success rate at that. So, those are things that, we're working on with legislation. Trafficking is such a tricky item. You have to play very cautiously to make sure that you're not re-victimizing victims. And that's the hard part about prosecution, is you don't want to re-victimize these victims and send them into a spiral where you lose them, because then there goes the case.
So what do we do on a local level to support law enforcement, support legislation, helping to change things so that we get more convictions, more prosecutions, help get more and more people out of the whole spiral, downward spiral that you're talking about? What can we do as individuals?
Well, be diligent, one, and paying attention to what's going on in your area, your surroundings. Two, don't be tempted not to report because you're unsure. I get a lot of people who are unsure on what it is that they're seeing. And so because they're unsure, they don't report. Hey, report it. Even if you're unsure, put the report in, get a hold of the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or contact your local authorities. If you have local authorities that are aggressive and you know that they are aware of trafficking and things like that, contact your local authorities and make sure. If you're unsure who to contact in your local authorities, hey, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, because they will get that information to your local authorities. I tell it, report, because as you report, we investigate. And as we investigate, we find things. And when we find things, we continue to find things. And that's how traffickers are caught. And that's how victims are rescued, because people report.
So we're putting up some of the resources or websites that you had given to me earlier. Do you want to elaborate on the Polaris Project or any of these other websites where parents and our viewers can be more informed or educated on this topic and be more proactive in preventing it from happening?
So you have the Polaris Project, who actually puts out the statistic numbers for human trafficking, but they are also, when you contact that National Human Trafficking Hotline number, they're the information holders who produce that information to the local authorities, the state authorities, and the federal authorities. On their website, it gives you information about trafficking. It tells you how to report. The National Human Trafficking Hotline page is actually the tip hotline. So you can go on there, you can make a personal hotline or an anonymous hotline, or you can actually put the hotline in through just typing. If you're not the type of person who likes to talk, but you can type, they give you all of those opportunities. You have to put in there as much information as you can about what you know and what you've seen. If you want to be contacted, they will contact you. If you don't, they won't, but they do still investigate. You have the other sites that you can go to, National National Missing and Exploited Children's website. The Center for National Missing and Exploited Children's website also is a location where you can report information related to trafficking, and they all work in conjunction with each other to make sure. You can also contact your Department of Homeland Security or your FBI and report that you believe that there's trafficking going on. So besides your local authorities, you have all of those websites and or information that you can put into a database and report. And long as you're reporting, you've did your part. You've did all that you can do at that point. I always encourage people not to get directly involved if you believe that there's trafficking, because it is very dangerous. It's dangerous for the reporting party, the victim, but it's also dangerous for the investigators as well. So we always ask that you not get directly involved, but report and then let us do what it is that we do.
Can we get the 800, the 888-373-7888 number up there on the screen? If not, we'll try to post it on our future programs for the human trafficking hotline that people can call. Well, we're running out of time, Captain Strong. Thank you for joining us. This was eye-opening as always. I look forward to getting your message out even more. Our next topic for next week, it is Valentine's Day, and we're dealing with relationships, and relationships are a big part of what can lead kids to be trafficked. So when you're dealing with marriage, divorce, makeups and breakups, we're going to have Steve Reed next week talking about relationships in general and how we can make it a positive impact on the family's life so that we can reduce the amount of trafficking that happens in our communities. Steve, if you want to add anything, we've got about 1:30 left.
One of the biggest things that I work with when I'm working with couples, young couples, old couples, whatever the case is helping them understand who they are personally, their personality temperament, should I say, but also helping them with their communication skills. And if we can help in those particular areas, then you're going to have a lot fewer conflicts because you're understanding exactly where people are coming from in the different things. My goal when I'm working with a couple, when I'm doing couple coaching, is to help them have a forever marriage. So I love that aspect of the coaching practice that I have. But I got to say one other side note, Captain Strong, I hope you will avail us and be able to come back and share with us some more. You have been
Absolutely
a wealth of information. Thank you very much.
anytime.
Thank you again. This is Ray Amanat and Stephen Reed with Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. Again, next week, Steve will be talking about relationships. This was sponsored by Heroes in Action, so check them out. Just Google them. We'll see you on our next show. Thank you and good day.